right, so you send over this article about 5 climate change misconceptions.
Uh-huh.
And it looks like we have got some fascinating discussions ahead.
Yes.
So just a quick reminder to everyone,
Yeah.
we are sticking to the information
Right.
presented in this article
Okay.
and focusing on explaining the arguments without taking sides.
Sounds good.
Ready to get started?
Absolutely. Let's unpack these misconceptions and see what the science actually tells us.
Okay, so the first one is the big one.
Okay.
The claim that climate change is a complete hoax.
Right.
The article mentions folks who believe it's all a scheme by powerful elites to control us.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe even just a way to make money. You know,
Yeah.
sometimes those theories can feel pretty intriguing, right?
They certainly grab your attention, but when we look at what the vast majority of scientists are saying,
Yeah.
the picture is quite different.
Okay.
Over 99% of climate scientists agree that climate change is real and human-caused. This isn't just a handful of researchers. This is a near-unanimous consensus within the scientific community.
That's a pretty compelling statistic.
Yeah.
So what kind of evidence do these scientists have? I mean, how do they know it's really happening?
Well, the evidence comes from multiple sources and has been rigorously studied for decades.
Okay.
The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, or IPCC, is the leading international body assessing climate change.
Okay.
They've concluded that Earth's average temperature has increased by 1.1 degrees Celsius since 1850.
Wow.
And the rate of warming is accelerating. This warming trend directly correlates with the increase in greenhouse gas emissions from human activities, primarily the burning of fossil fuels.
So it's not just about things getting a little warmer. It's about the speed at which it's happening.
Right.
And what does that mean for us besides maybe needing to crank up the AC a bit more often?
It's about far more than just warmer summers, unfortunately. The IPCC has linked this warming trend to a surge in extreme weather events.
Okay.
Heat waves, droughts, floods, you name it.
Yeah.
Think about it this way. If the Earth's climate system is like a finely tuned engine, we're essentially throwing a wrench into the gears, causing it to sputter and malfunction. This has devastating impacts on ecosystems and human societies around the world.
You know, when you put it that way, it makes those conspiracy theories seem much less likely.
Yeah, it's always important to examine the source of information and consider the weight of evidence.
That's true.
Now, the article also delves into the misconception that climate change is purely a Western problem.
Yeah.
It points out that historically wealthy nations like the U.S., the U.K., and Germany have contributed the most to greenhouse gas emissions due to their industrial revolutions. But can we really say it's solely their responsibility?
That's where things get a little more complicated, right?
Yeah.
It seems like even though some countries bear more historical responsibility, the impacts of climate change are being felt globally, regardless of who emitted the most.
Precisely. Climate change doesn't respect borders. The recent floods in Pakistan, for example, have been linked to climate change.
Wow.
Pakistan contributes relatively little to global emissions, yet they're experiencing some of the most devastating consequences. This highlights the issue of climate justice, which acknowledges that those who contributed the least to the problem are often the most vulnerable to its effects.
Climate justice is definitely a hot topic at COP27.
Yes.
The article quotes Dr. Lisa Schipper, a researcher at the University of Bonn, who says climate change is a global problem. The poorest, least industrialized nations are not passive victims, but active agents of change.
Right.
So even though some countries might be more vulnerable, they're still actively working towards solutions, right?
Absolutely. They're on the front lines of both experiencing the impacts and developing innovative adaptation strategies. It's crucial for developed nations to support these efforts, not just acknowledge historical responsibility.
Right.
Now, moving on to the third misconception.
Okay.
The article addresses the argument that a warmer planet might actually have some benefits. I imagine that might sound appealing to some folks, especially those in colder regions.
It's true. A little less winter doesn't sound too bad, right?
Yeah.
The article even mentioned that in 2003, Vladimir Putin suggested that a warmer Russia could mean less spending on fur coats and better harvests.
Okay.
It's an interesting perspective, but I'm guessing there's more to the story.
There's always more to the story. While localized benefits might exist in certain areas,
Yeah.
the overall economic and social costs of climate change far outweigh any potential positives. The IPCC estimates that if global temperatures rise by just 1.5 degrees Celsius, we're looking at $54 trillion in damages worldwide.
Wow.
And at a 2 degree Celsius increase, That number jumps to a staggering $69 trillion.
Whoa. Those numbers are hard to even grasp.
Yeah.
What exactly contributes to that massive cost?
Well, imagine the impact on agriculture.
Okay.
Increased droughts and floods could lead to crop failures and food shortages,
Right.
driving up prices and impacting food security globally. Then there's the damage to infrastructure, roads, bridges, and coastal communities succumbing to rising sea levels and extreme weather events, not to mention the healthcare costs associated with heat-related illnesses and the spread of infectious diseases. The economic ripple effects are immense.
So even if some regions might experience milder winters, the potential negative consequences on a global scale are far more significant.
Precisely. And even those perceived benefits can be deceptive.
Okay.
The article points out that even Siberia, known for its frigid temperatures, experienced an unprecedented wildfire season in 2021.
Wow.
Warmer temperatures coupled with drier conditions can increase the risk of wildfires even in traditionally cold regions.
That's a stark reminder that the impacts of climate change are complex and interconnected.
Yeah.
Even if some places see temporary benefits, the overall picture is one of increased risk and instability.
That's a key point to remember. Climate change is a global issue with far-reaching consequences.
Okay.
Now let's dive into the next misconception. The argument that observed sea level changes are just normal tides.
This one seems to get a lot of attention online with people making fun of those who supposedly don't understand how tides work.
Yeah.
But I'm guessing there's more to it than simply misunderstanding the tides.
There's a lot more going on beneath the surface, literally.
Okay.
The oceans act as a massive heat sink, absorbing over 90% of the excess heat trapped by greenhouse gases.
Right.
This leads to two major factors driving sea level rise.
Okay.
The melting of glaciers and ice sheets, which adds more water to the oceans, and thermal expansion, where water literally expands in volume as it warms.
Okay. So the oceans are not only getting more water from melting ice, but the existing water is also taking up more space because it's warmer.
Exactly. Now it's important to distinguish between tides and sea level rise.
Yep.
Tides are regular, predictable fluctuations in sea level caused by the gravitational pull of the moon and the sun. Think of them like a bathtub sloshing back and forth. The amount of water stays the same, it just shifts around. Sea level rise, however, is a long-term sustained increase in the overall volume of water in the oceans. It's like adding more water to the bathtub.
So we're not just seeing the water level go up and down with the tides.
Right.
We're seeing the baseline level of the ocean rise over time.
Precisely. Measurements show that global sea levels have risen by an estimated 16 to 21 centimeters, or about 6 to 8 inches.
Wow.
In the last century. And as Professor Ken Rice from the University of Edinburgh points out,
Okay.
this rate of rise is accelerating.
So it's not a steady increase, it's getting faster.
Oh.
What does that mean for coastal communities who are already dealing with the impacts of rising seas?
The outlook is concerning.
Yeah.
Without significant action to mitigate climate change, sea levels could rise by up to 2 meters by 2100.
Wow.
Imagine the impact on coastal cities, island nations, and vulnerable populations living in low-lying areas. We're talking about millions of people potentially displaced, along with the loss of critical infrastructure and ecosystems. It's a stark warning and a reminder of the urgency of addressing this challenge.
It's a lot to take in, and it leads us to the final misconception we'll unpack in this part of our deep dive.
Yeah.
The belief that it's simply too late to do anything about climate change.
Yeah.
I think this one resonates with a lot of people.
Yeah.
Especially with all the doomsday headlines and warnings about irreversible damage.
Yeah.
It can be pretty overwhelming.
It's understandable why people might feel that way. The situation is serious.
Yeah.
And the impacts of climate change are already being felt around the world. However, it's crucial to maintain a balanced perspective.
Okay.
While we can't erase the changes that have already occurred, we can still take action to mitigate further warming and adapt to the changes that are already underway.
So it's not about completely reversing course, but about slowing down the rate of change and minimizing the damage.
Think of it like this.
Okay.
If you're driving a car too fast and heading towards a dangerous curve, you wouldn't just give up and let the car crash.
Right.
You'd hit the brakes, slow down,
Yeah.
and try to steer yourself back on course. That's where we are with climate change.
Okay.
We need to hit the brakes on emissions and find ways to adapt to the changes that are already happening.
And how do we do that? What does hitting the brakes actually look like in practice?
It involves a combination of approaches. Reducing greenhouse gas emissions is key.
Okay.
This means transitioning away from fossil fuels and investing in renewable energy sources like solar, wind, and geothermal. It also means improving energy efficiency in our homes, buildings, and transportation systems.
So it's about finding cleaner ways to generate and use energy.
Exactly. And it also involves finding ways to remove existing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere.
Yeah.
There are various technologies being developed, like direct air capture,
Right.
which essentially acts like a giant vacuum cleaner for CO2. Additionally, nature-based solutions like reforestation and restoring degraded ecosystems can play a crucial role in absorbing carbon from the atmosphere.
So it's a multi-pronged approach.
Yes.
Reduce emissions, remove existing CO2, and adapt to the changes that are already happening.
Right.
It sounds like a massive undertaking.
It's certainly a complex challenge, but it's one we must address.
Yeah.
And it's important to remember that even though the situation might seem dire, we still have agency. We still have the ability to make a difference. The article ends on a hopeful note with a quote from Dr. Gilbert, who says, "Every step we can take to reduce human impact makes a difference. The window of opportunity to act is closing, but it is still there and we need to take it."
That's a powerful message. It's not about giving up in despair, but recognizing that we still have the power to shape the future. We'll dig deeper into some of these solutions in the next part of our deep dive.
Sounds good. Welcome back to our deep dive into climate change misconceptions. We were just discussing the misconception that it's too late to make a difference.
Yeah, it's definitely a misconception that can lead to inaction. Why bother changing my habits if it's all going downhill anyway? Right?
Right, but that's not the full picture. Not at all. It's important to understand that climate change isn't an on-off switch.
Okay.
It's more like a dimmer switch.
Right.
Every degree of warming we prevent, every ton of CO2 emissions we reduce, makes a tangible difference. It's not about achieving some perfect outcome overnight, but rather about bending the curve, slowing down the rate of warming to give ourselves more time to adapt and find solutions.
So it's a bit like knowing you have a long road trip ahead.
Yeah.
You might not be able to avoid traffic entirely, but you can choose a route that minimizes delays and keeps things moving in the right direction.
That's a great analogy. It's about shifting our perspective from a success or failure mindset to one of continuous improvement and mitigation. The article emphasizes that we already have much of the knowledge and technology needed to tackle climate change. The challenge lies in implementing these solutions on a large scale and making them accessible to everyone.
So we have the tools, but we need to figure out how to use them effectively and equitably. That brings us to the role of international cooperation.
Yeah.
Like what we see happening at COP27.
Right.
These summits often get a lot of attention, but are they actually effective in driving meaningful change?
They play a crucial role in bringing together world leaders, scientists, activists, and representatives from various sectors to discuss strategies, set targets, and hold each other accountable on a global scale. It's a forum for collaboration and commitment.
So it's not just about talking, but about turning those discussions into concrete actions.
Exactly. And while progress can sometimes feel slow, these summits have led to significant advancements such as the Paris Agreement, which aims to limit global warming to well below 2 degrees Celsius compared to pre-industrial levels. It provides a framework for international cooperation and sets a common goal.
I've heard criticisms that these summits often produce more promises than actual results. Is there any truth to that?
There's always room for improvement when it comes to translating agreements into tangible outcomes. It's important to acknowledge the complexities involved in global negotiations and the challenges of coordinating action across diverse nations with varying interests and priorities.
It's like trying to get everyone in a large family to agree on a vacation destination.
Right.
It takes time and compromise. But even if it's not perfect, it seems like these summits are still crucial for keeping climate change on the global agenda and pushing for collective action.
Absolutely. They provide a platform for sharing knowledge-building partnerships and driving innovation on a global scale. It's about fostering a sense of shared responsibility and finding common ground, despite differences. Now shifting gears a bit. Let's circle back to the individual level. You mentioned earlier that it can be easy to feel powerless in the face of such a massive global challenge.
Yes, that drop in the bucket feeling can be pretty demotivating if individual actions seem insignificant compared to the scale of the problem. Why even bother?
That's a common feeling, but it's important to remember that individual actions, when multiplied across millions of people, create a ripple effect that can lead to significant change. Even small changes in our daily habits can contribute to a larger solution. It's about collective action, but it also starts with individual empowerment.
So it's not just about governments and corporations taking action. It's also about individuals recognizing that their choices do matter.
Precisely. For example, consider transportation reducing our reliance on cars. By opting for public transport, biking, or walking not only reduces our carbon footprint, but also has positive impacts on our health and well-being.
I've actually started biking to work a few times a week,
Oh, wow.
and it's been a surprisingly enjoyable change. I get some exercise, avoid traffic, and feel good about reducing my impact.
Yeah.
It's a small step, but it feels good to be doing something.
That's fantastic. And those small steps multiplied across communities can create a significant shift. Think about the food we consume. Reducing meat consumption and supporting local and sustainable agriculture are powerful ways to minimize our environmental impact.
So it's about being mindful of our choices and understanding that those choices have consequences beyond our individual lives.
Exactly. It's about connecting our values with our actions and recognizing that we have the power to vote with our wallets and make choices that align with a more sustainable future. But it's not just about individual consumer choices, it's also about engaging in our communities.
Right.
Advocating for policies that promote clean energy, sustainable transportation, and responsible land use.
So it's about being informed citizens, participating in the political process, and holding our elected officials accountable for their decisions.
Absolutely. It's about recognizing that we have a voice and using that voice to demand action on climate change. Remember, the fight against climate change requires a multifaceted approach.
Yeah.
It's about individual responsibility, collective action, and systemic change working in tandem. Now, let's shift gears a bit and explore another crucial aspect highlighted in the article: the role of communication and storytelling in addressing climate change.
It strikes me that while facts and data are essential,
Right.
they don't always resonate with people on an emotional level.
Yeah.
Sometimes it takes a compelling story to truly capture our attention and inspire action.
You've hit on a crucial point. Human beings are emotional creatures, and we connect with stories more readily than we do with abstract data points. Communicating climate change effectively involves weaving those facts and figures into narratives that people can relate to.
Right.
Stories that highlight the human impacts and inspire hope and action.
So it's about moving beyond the graphs and charts and bringing climate change home,
Yeah.
making it personal and relatable.
Precisely. For example, sharing stories of communities already experiencing the impacts of climate change, highlighting their resilience and their efforts to adapt, can create a sense of urgency and empathy. It's about showcasing the human faces of climate change, both the challenges they face and the solutions they're pioneering.
It makes it more real, more tangible when you can connect it to people's lived experiences.
Exactly. And it's also about highlighting the positive stories, the innovations and the success stories that demonstrate that a sustainable future is within our grasp. The article actually mentions a really inspiring example.
Okay.
Costa Rica, a country that generates nearly 100% of its electricity from renewable sources like hydroelectric, geothermal, and wind power.
Wow. 100% renewable energy. That's incredibly impressive. It shows that transitioning to a cleaner energy system is not just a pipe dream, but a tangible possibility.
It certainly is, and it's not just happening on a national level. Cities like Copenhagen are pioneering sustainable urban planning with ambitious goals for carbon neutrality. They're transforming their infrastructure, investing in green spaces, and prioritizing cycling and public transport.
I've seen pictures of Copenhagen,
Mm-hmm.
and it looks like a cyclist's paradise. It's encouraging to see these real-world examples of cities taking concrete steps towards a more sustainable future.
Absolutely. These success stories provide a roadmap for others to follow and demonstrate that change is possible. Now, let's talk about another aspect of communication.
Okay.
The way we frame the issue of climate change, how we talk about it, can significantly influence how people perceive it and how they respond.
I imagine that framing it solely as a doom and gloom scenario might lead to apathy and inaction.
You're right. Constantly bombarding people with negative news and predictions of catastrophe can be overwhelming and counterproductive, while it's important to acknowledge the seriousness of the situation.
Yeah.
It's equally important to highlight solutions and opportunities for positive change.
So it's about striking a balance between conveying the urgency of the situation and inspiring hope and action.
Exactly. Research has shown that framing climate change in a way that emphasizes solutions, personal agency, and collective action tends to be more effective in motivating people to get involved.
It's about shifting the conversation from fear and paralysis to one of empowerment and possibility.
Yeah.
It's about saying, yes, this is a serious challenge, but we have the power to do something about it.
Precisely, it's about fostering a sense of hope and optimism grounded in the understanding that we can create a better future if we work together now. The article also highlights a particularly interesting way to communicate climate change.
Okay.
Through art and creativity.
I've definitely noticed that artists are increasingly engaging with this topic, using their creative voices to bring climate change to life. in powerful and evocative ways.
Right.
It seems like art has the unique ability to connect with people on an emotional level and bypass some of the intellectual barriers that can sometimes prevent us from fully grasping the complexity of climate change.
You're absolutely right. A powerful image, a moving song,
Right.
or thought-provoking performance can stay with us long after we've encountered it, shaping our perceptions and influencing our actions. Think about the climate-themed murals that are appearing in cities around the world. They transform urban landscapes into canvases for environmental advocacy, bringing the issue of climate change right into our everyday lives.
I've seen some of those murals, and they're truly striking. They make climate change impossible to ignore, and they often incorporate imagery and messages of hope and resilience.
Exactly. Art can disrupt our routines, challenge our assumptions, and spark conversations in a way that facts and figures alone sometimes can't. It can make the abstract concrete, the distant immediate, and the complex relatable.
And in a world saturated with information and competing messages, that ability to cut through the noise and grab our attention is invaluable.
Absolutely. And it's not just about raising awareness. Art can also inspire action. Think about the climate-themed music festivals that are popping up around the world. They use the power of music to bring people together and galvanize them around a shared cause, often incorporating educational components, showcasing sustainable practices, and providing platforms for activists and organizations to connect with a wider audience.
So it's about entertainment, but it's also about education and engagement. It's about using the arts as a catalyst for social change and creating a sense of community around climate action.
Precisely. And this brings us to an important point.
Okay.
The solutions to climate change are not just technological, they're also cultural. We need to shift our mindsets, our values, and our behaviors as a society.
Right.
It's about embracing a more sustainable way of life, rethinking our relationship with the natural world, and fostering a sense of collective responsibility for the planet.
It's about recognizing that we're all interconnected and that our individual actions have ripple effects that extend far beyond ourselves.
Exactly. And art can play a powerful role in shaping those cultural shifts, challenging the status quo, envisioning alternative futures, and inspiring us to imagine a world where sustainability is not just a goal, but a way of life.
It's about creating a cultural narrative that embraces a more harmonious relationship with our planet. So it's not just about changing our technologies, but also about changing our hearts and minds.
Well said, and that's a great transition into the next part of our deep dive, where we'll delve into the concept of a green economy and explore what a sustainable future might look like in practice.
Welcome back to the deep dive. It's amazing how much there is to unpack when it comes to climate change. In the last part, we were talking about how art and culture can play a role in shifting our perspectives. And that ties in nicely with this next concept I found intriguing, the idea of a green economy.
It's a term that's gaining a lot of traction, and for good reason.
Okay.
A green economy is essentially an economic model that prioritizes sustainability, social equity, and environmental protection.
Okay.
It's about shifting away from traditional extractive industries that rely on fossil fuels and finite resources, and moving towards a system that's regenerative and equitable.
So it's not just about slapping a green label on existing practices. It's about fundamentally rethinking how our economies function.
Precisely. It's about recognizing that a healthy planet is essential for a healthy economy.
Right.
A green economy aims to decouple economic growth from environmental degradation, ensuring that future prosperity doesn't come at the expense of the planet.
It sounds like a win-win situation. But I imagine there are challenges in making such a fundamental shift.
Yeah.
It's probably more than just swapping out gas-powered cars for electric ones.
There are definitely challenges. There are vested interests in maintaining the status quo.
Right.
And transitioning to a green economy requires significant investments, policy changes, and technological innovations. It's a complex undertaking, but the article suggests that a green economy also presents significant opportunities.
Like what kinds of opportunities? I'm picturing wind farms and solar panels, but what does this transition actually look like in everyday life?
Well, imagine cities designed for people, not cars, with efficient public transport bike lanes and walkable neighborhoods.
Okay.
Think about buildings powered by renewable energy, reducing our reliance on fossil fuels and creating cleaner air. Picture a food system that prioritizes local and sustainable agriculture,
Right.
reducing transportation emissions and supporting local farmers.
It sounds like a whole new way of living and interacting with our surroundings.
It's about creating a more resilient and equitable society where economic prosperity goes hand in hand with environmental stewardship. And it's not just a utopian dream.
Right.
There are already concrete examples of this transition happening around the world.
The article mentioned Costa Rica's impressive achievements with renewable energy.
Yes,
Are there other examples that stand out?
absolutely. Copenhagen, for example, is a model for sustainable urban planning.
Okay.
They've invested heavily in cycling infrastructure, making it one of the most bike-friendly cities in the world.
Wow.
They've also implemented ambitious green building standards and are working towards becoming carbon neutral by 2025.
Okay.
And it's not just about big cities. Rural communities are finding innovative ways to embrace a green economy, from developing ecotourism initiatives to revitalizing local food systems.
It's inspiring to see these real-world examples proving that a green economy is not just a theoretical concept, but a tangible possibility. But it's not just up to governments and businesses to make this happen, right?
Right.
What can individuals do to support this transition?
Individual actions have a huge ripple effect. By choosing to support businesses that prioritize sustainability,
Yeah.
by investing in energy-efficient appliances and homes, and by advocating for policies that support a green economy, we can contribute to this systemic shift.
It's about aligning our values with our spending habits, our lifestyle choices, and our civic engagement. It's about understanding that we have the power to shape the market and influence policy through our everyday decisions.
Exactly. Every purchase we make, every vote we cast, every action we take is a statement about the kind of world we want to live in. It's about recognizing that we're not just passive consumers, but active participants in shaping the future.
It's empowering to realize that we're not powerless in the face of this challenge. We've explored a lot of ground in this deep dive, from debunking common misconceptions to delving into the complexities of climate science and the possibilities of a green economy. As we wrap up, what are some key takeaways you hope our listeners will carry with them?
First and foremost, I hope they come away with a deeper understanding of the urgency of addressing climate change based on scientific evidence, not misinformation or conspiracy theories. It's crucial to be critical consumers of information and to base our understanding on facts.
So it's about being informed and discerning, especially in today's world where information, both accurate and inaccurate, spreads so rapidly.
Exactly. Second, I hope they recognize that while the challenges are significant, they are not insurmountable.
Right.
There are solutions, both technological and societal, that can pave the way toward a more sustainable future. It's not about giving in to despair, but about embracing a sense of agency and possibility.
And that ties into what we were discussing earlier about individual actions having a collective impact. It's not about feeling overwhelmed by the enormity of the challenge, but recognizing that we all have a role to play, no matter how big or small.
Precisely. And finally, I hope they feel empowered to take action both in their individual lives and as engaged citizens to contribute to this collective effort. Whether it's making changes in their daily habits, supporting sustainable businesses, advocating for policy changes, or using their creative voices to raise awareness, there are countless ways to make a difference.
It's about understanding that we're all in this together, and that our collective actions can create a future where both humanity and the planet thrive well. I think that's a great note to end our deep dive on. It's been an incredibly insightful journey, and I've learned so much from our conversation.
It's been a pleasure exploring these topics with you.
And to our listeners, we hope this deep dive has equipped you with a clearer understanding of climate change, the challenges we face, and the possibilities that lie ahead. Remember, the future is not something that happens to us. It's something we create together. Thanks for joining us on this journey.